Yes, everybody, happy Friday evening. Hopefully, Spurs fans are in a good mood before we descend to the game on Sunday against Everton. Of course, we're going to be wrapping up our thoughts kind of on the Monaco game and just sort of talk a bit in general about Thomas Frank and maybe his need to start improving the style of play here because Spurs fans, I think they try to find that balance between wanting results and then wanting entertaining football at the same time. And I think at the minute, Thomas Frank's results are starting to slip, but the entertaining football has not exactly really been there for the most part. So we're going to be talking about that today. We also have some other little bits and pieces. The Bentancur stuff just doesn't seem to go away. Maybe I'm also a bit sensitive and I do like to defend my man. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then some bits and pieces about Vicario, who, of course, had a brilliant game. But Vicario, maybe then very quickly after having a brilliant game, seemed to sort of throw some shade towards his teammates, whether we think that was justified or not. Please, everybody, smash the like button as you're coming in here. Do throw in your comments. We'll be happy to bring them up on screen. And if you do want to stop the show at any point, feel free to ask us anything. And if you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member or throwing in a super chat. And we'll just bring in some people quickly here, but we'll make the best use of Billy's time as well as Dave's this Friday evening. Scotty Hynum, always good to see you, sir. Mark News saying we need to replace Harry Kane, get that Harry Kane fund out going. Logan THFC, evening fellas, big up to all. Andrew Burnett as well. Thanks for supporting the channel, Andrew, as well as Yazuagi. Great name. And Dermatron sending in a super sticker, just pointing up to maybe Dave at the heavens. Maybe Dermatron is pointing at Dave's camera, hopefully performing for this stream here. Hopefully. But let's get this show underway, everybody. Please, again, let us know if you have anything that you say or disagree with what we're going to be talking about. But we're going to be first discussing kind of how fans have kind of grown more and more concerned about the style of play, especially after that Monaco game. Billy, are you worried about Frank's ability or inability to improve the style of play to match that fans' desire for entertaining football? Because the results were good in the beginning, but now the results are slipping, but the entertaining football has not necessarily been achieved yet, you would say.
I wouldn't say I'm majorly worried just yet. Like, I think we have to realize that we're a very, very small way into a project, hopefully a long-term project. And it takes a lot of time for a new manager to come in and really shape a team. Just 12 games into the season, it's not time to panic just yet. Definitely what it has done is led to some questions. I'm definitely starting to question it a little bit, thinking, is this the right thing going on here? I've been really disappointed in the way that we've been playing the last few games. It's been pretty dreadful to watch. Not been too bad results-wise because the draw against Monaco is not a horrendous result, but it was a pretty horrendous performance, particularly in the second half. So I'm not like panic station worrying, thinking like some of the discourse on Twitter about Frank out, he's got to go and all this stuff. I think that's way too soon to be making anything like that. But I definitely think there are some question marks starting to shoot up.
Yeah, and just to throw it back at you, Billy, like, do you think it's down to just Thomas Frank, or is it maybe down to lack of quality players in certain areas?
Oh no, this is the main symptom. The main thing this is a symptom of is years of squad mismanagement. We've had our squad has been badly mismanaged over the last few years, probably since we moved into the stadium. We've had some terrible transfer windows. I think a particular window which sticks out for me at the moment is the Solanke window, and we just bought Solanke and two teenagers in Graham Bergvall. I think we're feeling the cost of that at the moment because, while it's great to have lots of young talent in Bergvall, Gray, Odebear and Tell, you can't rely on them to win levels in the Champions League and win consistent Premier League matches. They're great young players, but, we have to sign more quality. And this summer was a slight change in that, but I think we're still feeling the effects of having, quite a badly managed squad over the last few years. We've got a lot of really imbalanced squad, I would say. We've got a lot of, sort of left wingers and that we don't particularly want to play and stuff like that. There's some glaring holes in the squad too. So I think the bigger factor for me is the years of squad mismanagement that we've had under our previous, stewardship.
I think a lot of people would agree with you there. For me, it's a bit of a two-parter. I'm a bit concerned about Frank's ability, even if he were here for a long time, to deliver the same entertaining football that we might have had under a Pochettino or what we could have had with an Ange Postecoglou. But I do feel like a lot of it, and this is where I do give him a slight excuse, is that I think a lot of it is down to the quality players or lack of quality players that he has in that forward line. Because I think during that last season that he had with Brentford, where I think they scored almost as many goals as we did, if not more goals than we did, I think he was pretty reliant on having a very rock solid defense. That's what we can tell he is good at, is he can build a robust midfield, a solid defense, but then it's kind of about relying on bits of individual quality from his forwards when he had Mbumo, when he had Wisa, when he had Ivan Toney. And I'm wondering, is he really a guy that can get the most out of, let's say, lesser quality forward players? That's where my slight worry is. I'm not sure if he is that guy that can get the most out of a Matisse Tell or get the most out of the Odebears, the Johnsons of the world. I think he does kind of rely on having real quality players up front, which is kind of a bit on
Well,
him. And also it's kind of sometimes how it is. Maybe a manager can improve one area of the team, but maybe kind of then relies on more world-class players in other areas to make up for it.
But I think where the problem comes in, is the naysayers of Thomas Frank are sort of hitting back, because the big backers of Thomas Frank, when we first signed him, were saying he will come in and develop players. And I think, there's been a large realization that some players are just not at that level. And I do think that's one good thing to come of it. Johnson's been way overhyped. Matisse Tell, way overhyped. Udeber, way overhyped. I think fans realize that, quality actually matters now moving forward. And I think that's a good thing to come of it. But I don't think Thomas Frank is a result of all blame, to be honest with you. I think, look, if he had Madison back from a fully fit Madison and Kulusevski, I think it would alleviate some of our problems massively. If Mawani, I've seen more than enough after 20 minutes against Monaco, to know that he's going to make an impact. He's a real handful. It's the first time I've seen a striker in Yonks since Harry Kane actually link up with other players around him and stuff. So there are some injuries that, if Frank can get them back, will alleviate the problem. However, one problem I have right now with Thomas Frank is he's not including Pape Sarr. And the reason why I say that is, he was asked about in the press conference today, and he said there was no reason for it whatsoever. Other players have just performed better. Who? Bergvall? Simmons? They haven't performed better in that role. With Pape Sarr, all of pre-season and the first 6 games of the season, which Thomas Frank admitted to today, he was absolutely crucial. He was involved in nearly every single goal Tottenham scored going forward. And for me, since he's taken him out, the football has been getting worse. We've lacked the ability to be able to get even the basic shots on target and stuff like that. And results have also dropped. Results have fallen off, which highlights how crucial Pape Sarr is. And the reason why is, right now, with what's available to us in that front line, we don't have the ability to play through teams. Pape Sarr was pressing high up the pitch. And I think what Jurgen Klopp said before, pressure in the final third sometimes is just as good as having players that can play through in the final third, because you can turn the ball higher up the pitch. You have less players to play through. And that's what Pape Sarr offered. We didn't have the ability to play through teams, but we found a way around it. And since he's come out of that team, we are dropping deeper and deeper. Teams are getting more and more shots on our goal, and it's a twofold problem. So why he took Pape Sarr out of the team, I do not know why. Yes, he's not your traditional number 10, your traditional playmaker or creative player.
Yeah.
But he goes and presses the ball. He wins the ball higher up, and he plays other people in space on goal. And for me, that's where I think Thomas Frank has to take a large portion of the responsibility for us being poor going forward. I think he has to take a massive portion. But I do what's the right word? I am with him in terms of it's hard with the likes of Udeber, Tell, players like that. Also, Xavi Simons is another part of the problem. I'm starting to question, did he really want Xavi Simons, or does he know what to do with a player like Xavi Simons, in the final third? Because since he's arrived, he's played him off the left, he's played him off the middle, he's been in and out of the team. If this is the guy that Frank was begging for, then he should have just put him straight in the team and stuck with him in a certain position. He would know where he already wants him to fit into the system. So he has had more help than what Ange Postecoglou has had. We brought in Mo Kudus. We've brought in Xavi Simons. So he's had a bit more help, and it doesn't really look any better. Even the new site, if he hadn't had more Kudus this year, it would have looked a lot worse than what it did under Ange Postecoglou. So I'm sort of concerned that I'm not sure he knows what to do with some of these attacking players. Like, it's clearly obvious to me that Xavi Simons is not physically ready to play in the number 10 centrally for Tottenham Hotspur. That's why no one can find him with the ball. And that's why when he plays in that role, he keeps drifting out to the left-hand side, because he's looking for the space to be able to get on the ball and get turned. So why not then play him down the left-hand side where he's going to get the space, acclimatize him to the Premier League, and then eventually move him into the middle. So I do think Thomas Frank is as much a part to blame as Daniel Levy's transfer policies and not bringing in quality players in years gone by. It is a twofold problem. But you would argue, with the help he's been given in the summer, has he made the most of it? I don't think so.
Maybe not. I mean, there was also, you're right, that period where maybe we didn't have a number 10 in there yet. We didn't have Xavi Simons to pick from, but we were bullying teams in the midfield with Sarr, Bentancur, Palinha. You know, they were just bossing teams, you know, winning the ball over constantly. PSG, West Ham, you know, those games where Man City as well, you know, it just felt like, you know, even if there wasn't a creative player in there, didn't really matter because we were just winning the ball back on such a regular basis in good areas that we were creating chances that way, like you said, to Jurgen Klopp's quote. I just thought this was a good comment from Vim. You know, kind of, I'm in the same boat here. Evening, lads. It's early days and lack of quality, in my opinion. My worry is when we do get our quality back, will there still be quality there, though, with Matters, Kulu, and Solanke? That's what I'm saying. I think it'd be easier to judge Frank if he did have all these guys available, because I don't think then there wouldn't be much of an excuse really at this stage. I think then we could sort of say, well, it doesn't really look like he's able to deliver this, you know, brilliant, entertaining football while getting results. And I think that's what he has been brought in to do, is just sort of pick up more results than Ange did, but at the same time, try to still deliver some type of entertaining performances, or at least ones that we can get behind. But for me, with the lack of quality players, it's hard to fully go there, you know, and put it on his door.
But this was also one of the big question marks I had around when Thomas Frank was coming in, and many people sort of berated me for my opinion. I think people hated Postecoglou that much, you know, that anyone would have done at the time, no matter who came in, they would have got behind. But one of my big question marks around Thomas Frank was, you know, does he have the ability to play a different brand of football that he played at Brentford? It was never going to wash copying and pasting what he's done at Brentford. And right now, you would argue so he's copy and paste it. But, you know, at Brentford, they had one of the lowest possession stats in the league last season. You know, he was going to have to come in and adapt to play a more possession-based game to appease Tottenham fans. And you have to, as a Big Six team anyway, if you want to go on and win trophies and stuff like that. And I also said, you know, does he have the ability to be able to get a cohesive forward line together? There's still questions that haven't been answered yet.
Yeah. Just want to take a few of these. Thank you, Eddie, for the support. Had a little row with Eddie earlier this morning, talking back and forth about Ange, and he was saying, Eddie's been right again. No, I'm kidding, lads. Come on, Frank, bring us some glory. I need have a good reason to stay up. Too late for me to watch this shit. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Eddie. I don't really blame you, where the football's been pretty dreadful, and then you're getting up at more ridiculous hours than even I am to watch these games. So I can definitely see where the patience would wear thin. But there is a good question I actually have just off the back of this, maybe with what Eddie's kind of saying here. I mean, Billy, is Frank undergoing something similar to maybe what Conte, Nuno, and Jose did, where once the results started slipping, there wasn't really that much patience because the football wasn't really that amazing? So maybe compare that to Pochettino or Postecoglou, where the football was quite good, that then if the results slipped, there was more of a patience there because the football looked a bit better. Do you kind of get where I'm saying? Is he in more that Conte maybe bracket right now, Frank, where the patience isn't really there?
And there's obviously like a compromise for fans, because if we're going to sit there and we're going to pay, or we're going to watch, we're going to get up early online across the world, we're going to give up our day to watch this, we're going to go to the stadium, we're going to watch at home with our friends, plan our day around it. If we're going to give that time commitment, you at least want some kind of entertainment value. And if you've not got that, or at least you have to win, and then for it to be worth it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a bit of a payoff there with entertainment versus winning. So if we're doing neither of those things, and that's when fans will start to question it a little bit. And I think what fans, Tottenham are an impatient fan base at the best of times. I don't dispute that fact, but I think when fans are at the beginning of a new project like this, I think they'll be happy as long as they're seeing some improvements and they're seeing some things they can cling on to. So maybe a really good performance, thinking, right, we didn't get the win, but at least we can start to see what he's trying to do. At the moment, I can't see the system. I can't see it working particularly well. I don't really understand what we're trying to do as on the football, unless it's a set piece or a throw in. I haven't seen any sort of attack and play. I think, at least you can see what you're trying to do. And when you compare it to Postecoglou, everyone could see from day one what we were trying to do: get the ball wide, cut it back to Brennan Johnson on the back post and score a goal, cut it back to the box, score a goal. Inverted fullbacks. It's very, very obvious, very clear style of play. Pochettino, the same, pressive monsters all the time, trying to win the ball high at the pitch, turn it over and score. Frank, we haven't really seen that yet. And the interesting thing is that you have some really good performances at the beginning of the season. I don't know where that's gone. It's just like it's completely gone. We haven't played well now. We played well in flashes against Leeds, but that's a promoted team away from home. We haven't put in a good performance for a little while, so it's definitely starting to get concerning. And I think, to answer your question, fans will rightly question it, because if we're not winning and we're watching this kind of football, I think patience runs a lot quicker than if they're at least being entertained.
Exactly. But also the pressure is massively on. Like, we can sit here and say, give him time. But, you're already seeing fans starting to question, which shows, he's already, in some fans' eyes, already on borrowed time. But if you look at the fixture list we've got coming up here now for the rest of this month, and I think this fixture list will naturally dictate, what time he gets, because it's one of them. I think it'll either bring fans with him, or fans will get off on board with him. We've got Everton away, haven't won up away in 4 years. Newcastle away, think of the hidings we took up there in the last few years. Chelsea at home, traditionally a tough game for Tottenham. We have Copenhagen, which you'd like to think we should win, but if he plays like Sir Brennan Johnson, no, that's not a given. Man United at home, big win against Liverpool. They might kick on. Then we've got Arsenal at home and then PSG. Now, in these games, Tottenham have traditionally struggled. You go back to Ange Postecoglou's first season, we had a similar period, and that's where you would argue he lost a lot of the fans because we didn't pick up the right results heading into that. And then we went into that period, and everyone questioned absolutely everything. And we've got that period coming up. Do we have the front line to be able to go and win them games? Right now, we don't. So if we end up going into that period and we don't pick up a lot of points, all of a sudden the goodwill factor is gone. You're in a situation where you're only as good as your last match and stuff like that. And naturally, more people are going to ask more questions and put more scrutiny on the guy. So he doesn't have time. It's something he has to show tomorrow against Everton. Or a Sunday against Everton. This is a must-win game for him. The loss against Villa puts pressure on him. The result against Wolves now puts pressure on him heading into these games. The draw against Bodo Glimt puts pressure on him now. Games that we should have won. The shit performance against Monaco midweek. The pressure's already building, and he's got a lot more tough games to come. This is a period where it's either going to bring people along with him or they're going to get off the journey. It's a tough fixture list ahead, and he has to show that he can handle it, that he can solve these problems. At the end of the day, that's why we brought him in here. He's known for changing things up during games. He's known for changing his system and tailoring it towards the opposition. I think the question should be, he's never managed at this level before and never had a fixture schedule so demanding at Brentford. He had 7 days between every game because he went out in the cups in the first round to get his game plan intact. When he doesn't have them 7 days and he's only got 1 day on a training pitch in between games, does it work? And the reason why it maybe doesn't work is because we don't have the quality right throughout the team or the strength and depth to execute it. When you're playing at this level, the quality of your players really matter. But also, the instructions you're giving them really matter. I don't think he helps himself with how passive we were out of possession against Monaco. We sat in a mid-block, no pressure on the ball. We allowed them to come at us at will. Usually in a mid-block, you get one player that presses. When the ball's moved in, he tucks in, the next guy goes. We've seen absolutely none of that. And what you're seeing is gradually the performance is getting worse. And we've got a really tough fixture schedule coming up. So the pressure is on.
Yeah, I
will
think
say on the flip
ahead,
side of that, though, if you want to win fans over quickly, a win against Chelsea or a win against Arsenal will do absolute wonders for him. You can go and beat Chelsea at home, a team you haven't beaten for 2-3 years now. That'll get a lot of fans back in your side. If you can somehow
where's the goals going to come from to win them games?
Yeah, that's true, mate. That is true. If you could miracle a win at the Emirates, then you'll go down in folklore. The way it's been so long.
Yeah, 100%.
It's been so long since we bloody won there in the league. And the Redknapp 3-2 game, which feels like a lifetime ago. So it is a worrying, but it's also a big opportunity. If we can somehow come out of those 3 fixtures, Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, with say 6 points, 7 points, then suddenly the fans will be right on side with Thomas Frank.
Yeah. Just in defense of Thomas Frank, though, quickly as well, I think there also has to be a massive realization with the problems he's faced. And I think we are going to approach the point where Spurs fans are going to have to make a decision. Are you going to continuously blame the manager for every single problem, like many done last year? For instance, everyone blamed the manager last year for the injuries. No one's blaming Thomas Frank this year. But will they, once results don't start going awry? So my whole point is, at some point, we have to realize until the manager is really given a full 11 to pick from, plus a bit of strength in depth, results are always going to be hampered and not necessarily down to their ability. And I would hope this time around, because there was a huge clamour for the guy coming in here in the first place, fans will show him that patience. Because at the end of the day, you could sack him, you could bring in another guy. If they still have a left wing and a striker problem, they're going to suffer the same fate in terms of not being able to win games. And it's going to be the same shit. We're seeing the same shit we seen last year but two different managers, two different philosophies, two different intensities and stuff like that. At some point, we've got to realize and be the smarter guys in the room and give this guy time, just like maybe Arsenal did with Arteta, when things maybe initially weren't going right, but they showed with patience, with backing the guy and backing his philosophy, you will get the rewards. So hopefully this time around, Spurs fans will show a little bit of patience. And this is coming from a guy who had question marks and lost a lot of his own following with his question marks around Thomas Frank when we first hired him.
My question would be this as well. If you look at the big six managers, you've got Guardiola, Amorim, Slot, Maresca and Arteta. How many of them are going to do any much better with Tell and Richarlison as your current striking options? Odegaard on the left. Kudus is obviously a very good player, but that is a mile off the rest of the top six attacking options. Yeah, if you had a fit Madison, if you had Kulusevski, Solanke back to that, okay, we might see some more. But what kind of manager can do well with those options up front? It's a real tough hand that Thomas Frank's been dealt with, I think. You're completely right, Dave.
No, that's a very good perspective to look at it from, Billy. I agree. I just quickly wanted to say, to almost answer my own question selfishly, I would say I think this is just natural in football, but I think he does fall in a bit of the Conte sort of Jose bracket where the football isn't going to be that entertaining week in, week out. You might get some entertaining games here and there, but it is then reliant on the fact that you just pick up results. Like Conte and Jose are some of the winning most managers, pick up some of the most points that we've ever seen really in football. And Nuno, we saw last season with Forest, the same thing, right? It was just picking up point after point, getting really good results, but maybe performances weren't always that really, let's say, amazing to watch. But I think once results do start slipping and you do play less of an entertaining brand of football, I think the patience isn't really as long, or the patience isn't going to be as strong. I think it's just nature. I think it's just how it is. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And maybe that is the benefit sometimes of being in the Russell Martin, Postecoglou bracket, where if you talk so much about how great your football is and how much we're going to play an entertaining style, you maybe then get that buy-in more from the fan base when results start slipping. Whereas in Frank's case, I think he's more in the Conte kind of bracket where the patience is, I don't think the patience for Frank will be as long as it was for Ange.
No, look, I think you're absolutely spot on, right? If you're not being entertained and you're paying some of the highest ticket prices to go and watch games of football, and Spurs bringing all the best entertainment acts and clearly made it into an entertainment venue, then Spurs fans are going to show less and less patience for what's going on. But, we all want an entertaining brand of football, but surely the big problem is we don't have a lot of entertainers. That's the big problem. The only entertainer we have right now is Mo Kudus. Yeah. That's a huge problem. We've got a lot of players that can fight. Paulinho, Romero, Van der Ven, Porro, they're all dogged. They can fight. But the reality is we don't have a lot of entertainers. And that's why I keep saying to Spurs fans, we are what we are right now. As frustration as it is. And look, I'm probably going to be a bit hypocritical here, but, because I will show my frustration after every game and stuff like that. But the reality is there has to be an understanding of what we are. We don't have a lot of entertainers, which means every game until we solve our problem at left wing and striker, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be decided by a goal here or there. You can already see it coming. A lot of our games have been decided by a goal here or there. And with the bigger games coming up, it's going to be the exact same. And at some point, you've just got to get up for the fight and realize it's going to be this when there's not a lot he can do right now. His hands are tied in terms of what he can select.
And Jason Bell asking the exact same question you were there, Billy, just a second ago. So I think definitely a lot of people agree with you there. Paul Markey saying fans need to stop the negativity as Frank and new players are only 8 weeks still at the wheel. Key players are also still missing. Only real need is a goal scorer or a center forward. He brought this up the other day, Paul. I do feel like maybe we need another winger as well of actual quality. I think then, again, we could probably start to make better judgments of what Thomas Frank can maybe do a little bit more in terms of the attack. But I completely agree with Billy, what he said earlier. Like, really, apart from Kudus, almost no one in the whole attacking depth, all the players that we have to pick from for that forward line, do any of them apart from Kudus get into some of these top six sides? And that is a damning indictment that you would only name about one of them. Like, everyone in the depth chart pretty much just doesn't make it. But Billy, what do you make? Do you think just needs maybe a star striker to come into the team, Kolomwani or Solanke to come good, and then, in my opinion, probably a winger as well?
Yeah, I think we're really missing Solanke. I also think Romero has been an absolutely monumental loss, like, for our build-up play. Like, we just don't have many players that can do a line-breaking pass. He's probably the only player in our squad that can actually do that, which is a bit of a worry in itself. I think we've had to bypass the midfield quite a bit in terms of any creativity, because we've got essentially playing with two number sixes in Bentancur and Paulinho. I think, our build-up has been worrying under Frank. I do think, if you look, I just think it would be such a different team if Maddison, Kulusevski and Solanke back fit. I know it could be a long time before we see some of those players, but it's just been dealt a really bad hand. And when you include Son as well, it's about 80 plus goal contributions that we've lost there since last season. So I think it's really difficult for any manager to come in and do that.
Yeah, completely agree there. Then Artist T saying, sadly, we're due for a hiding before the year ends. The warning signs are there, and I'm genuinely scared things have to change, and soon it will get ugly. My biggest problem with maybe the last game against Monaco, Dave and Billy, is that defensively, for the majority of the games, I think we have been pretty solid. We haven't conceded that many chances. And then going forward, it has been a bit frustrating to watch. Just felt like against Monaco, there weren't really any positives apart from Vicario having a good game. That was the only thing I could say is, and maybe Kolomoani showing that he can be a bit better than Richarlison. But apart from that, we didn't look good going forward. We didn't seem to have any idea what we're doing with the ball. And then out of possession, we looked like we were wide open in midfield and in the back. They carved chance after chance after chance, Monaco. And that was my worry, is maybe you take one thing, as long as one area of the pitch is strong, maybe you can deal with early stages of the season. The other area is kind of lacking, but the Monaco game is just nothing was really good. And perhaps that's where some people are pressing the panic alarms.
Where the concern comes in is because we have to be defensively solid. We don't have the ability to go and score 2-3 goals. We don't even know when we're going to score our next goal. That's a huge problem, which means we have to keep clean sheets in order to win games. If we don't, it makes your life very, very difficult. And that's a huge problem.
100%. Just want to welcome in Kiwi Spurs as well. Steve D's in the house. And then Drew Zilla saying, big up, lads. Great listen as always, member for 25 months. Artist T saying, we're lucky we had an easy start because we'd be absolutely in the bottom half of the table right now. Take away our defense and we'd look like wolves. Is Artist T going a little extreme here, Billy, or do you kind of agree with his worry signs of potentially us do a hiding sometime soon?
I kind of think, I don't know. I think, I'm sure if you take away any team's defense, they'll look like wolves at the moment. And so I think it's unfair to label that on a new manager that's just come in, because, when you compare it to last season, the biggest issue that we all wanted to fix was the defense. And then Frank has done an okay to decent job at doing that. So I think if you take that away from him, then that's basically saying that you're taking away the only good thing. It's like the last couple of seasons ago when people used to say about Postecoglou, if you take away the first 10 games, he's rubbish. But why would you take away those first 10 games? Though, I think in football, it's that kind of hypothetical situation is always unfair on the managers, because they still exist. So I think we do look worrying attacking going forward, but I do think, to Frank's credit, he has made us look more solid. But then I do have to say that second half against Monaco was, for me, the first time this season where we've looked like we don't have any sort of defensive structure as well. I think it's the first time this season where we've been outplayed to that degree. Even the Aston Villa game, which was a really poor game, really poor result, we only really limited Aston Villa to 2 chances, which they both scored. So this was the first time this season where we've really looked like we didn't have any clue what we're doing defensive-wise.
Yeah, just wanted to add this one maybe for some people in the chat who do want us to remain patient and do want us to sort of ease off a little bit. This was just a funny thing that I noticed was last night, in fact, the Go-Ahead Eagles from Netherlands beat Aston Villa away from home, I believe. And then Palace lost at home to a 6th place Cypriot League side, 1-0. And just made me kind of think, are we maybe overreacting in the early stages of the season? Dave, just quickly on that. It was kind of funny to see those two teams, that one of them just beat us recently and the other one, everyone's shown a lot of praise for in the case of Palace, but losing to a 6th place Cypriot League side at home, of all places, at Selhurst Park, was a big shock to me. So maybe Europe is just a strange place or strange competition.
Yeah, look, you can be found out in Europe, if you're sort of off it slightly. Yeah, 100%. But I don't judge Tottenham Hotspur off, what Palace have done or haven't done. I don't judge them off what Villa have done and stuff like that. I sort of judge us on where we want to go, which is going and competing with the best. And, we can't be having these slip-ups, because if we do, we will end up being a Palace and teams like that. And that's what I want to try and avoid. Look, our Spurs being, going too early. Look, we can say that. People went after Postecoglou quicker. People went after Nuno quicker. People have gone after previous managers a lot quicker. As soon as Jose and Conte hired, people didn't want them in from the very beginning, you know. So we could sit here and say we go after them too early, but at the end of the day, performances and results dictate how fans are feeling, and fans are going to give their opinion. You know, that's at the end of the day, with the amount of money in football and stuff like that, you know, it's so reactionary now, and that's just the way it is. Look, like I said, I would like Spurs fans to be a bit smarter in the room and not make Frank the problem, you know, like we done with previous managers, and realize that at some point, if we want to get back to where we were under the Pochettino days, you need to give it time. You know, you need to give this guy a little bit of time. Now, I'm not saying do a Ryan on it and give him the whole season and results and everything else don't matter, but I think there has to be a bit of fairness in it and go, yeah, we're not great going forward, but when you're missing, you know, the Moani, Kulusevski, Madison, players that would instantly walk into that starting lineup, you know, and you're dealing with players that are bang average and have shown to be bang over average under other managers, you can't keep making everything the manager's problem. At some point, you have to decide: is Frank a bigger problem than not having a striker or left winger? And I'm not at that point yet. Like I said, I'm not one of those. I'm not giving him full leeway on it. Like, there are stupid things he's doing, like taking Pape Sarr out, for instance. Ridiculous call. Not playing Xavi Simons off the left-hand side. Ridiculous call. He doesn't help himself in that regard. But at the end of the day, we need better players in the door. And until we do that, no manager, it's going to look the same on the next guy that walks in the door. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely fair. Just wanted to transition, and we'll take Paul Markey's comment here. And then there's a good comment here, actually, from I think it was someone bringing up the likes of Arsenal, which is Dave put in something about. But Paul Markey just saying this here: Odegaard will come good. Johnson, Richie, and Tell need to go. Just on this, Billy, I mean, I actually really like Wilson Odegaard. I think it's unfortunate that he is at the moment maybe the one that Frank has the most confidence in, because I think he is still very, very raw. I do like watching Odegaard a bit more on the left than any of the other options that we have at the minute. But what do you make of just, again, the left wing options? Has anyone really, you know, impressed you, or is it kind of just hard to pick?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm in the same boat as you, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of how poor the squad planning's been, because Odegaard is a decent young player. He should not be having the responsibility to have to start every single game. I think that's where the problem lies. I think if we had a quality left wing on the same level as Kudus, then Odegaard could come in and rotate with him, you know, play a Champions League game a bit, you know, get a substitute here and there, sub appearance in the Premier League. At the moment, we're in a situation where Odegaard pretty much has to play both the Premier League and the Champions League game. I think he started the last 4 games for us. And then you obviously got some other options in Tell and Xavi, but they're both players that aren't really traditional wingers, and they're certainly not take-on wingers like Odegaard is. I think for me, in terms of our other options that we've got and the way that we've left ourselves, I think the best thing that we can do is give Odegaard until January some confidence in first-team ability, in the hope that he will play himself into being the winger that he could be. But I think it's a real shame that we don't have that really quality left winger option that we could rotate Odegaard with. And for me, that's something that I would immediately look to be doing in January. I think that's our biggest glaring hole in the squad. Obviously, in summer, we know that it was a priority for them because they tried to sign Savinho, who conveniently, he just got man of the match in the Champions League game, by the way. But I think that is a massive, massive hole in the squad. And I think you have to look at it at the very beginning of a project. You can't do everything in one summer window. And if we had got a left wing in that window, it would have been fantastic. But maybe, you know, that summer when we signed Kudus and Xavi and Palhinha, that's a good start to building a squad. Now we need to have similar windows in January and summer and relentlessly buy quality players, because I hate to mention them, but if you look at Arsenal and their project they've had over the last 5 years, every single window they've improved and they've spent a lot of money to do it. And now you'd be hard pressed to think that they don't have a really, really good chance of winning the league this season. Have they had for the last 4 seasons?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think I would like Odegaard as more of a rotation option for some of these games, but to him to be the number one kind of guy for Frank right now is a bit worrying, because I still think he's a bit like Bergvall and others, where he still has so much to learn and it's still so raw, in my opinion, at times. And to have him be the one that we're relying on in these big games that are coming up, you know, the likes of Chelsea, you know, even this Everton game, I think that is a damning indictment of the squad planning, like Billy touched on in the very beginning. Seemed like you were to come in, Dave.
Yeah, look, I sort of agree with yourself and Billy on that, you know, yeah, he's good enough to, you don't mind him dipping in and out. He's not good enough to be the starting left winger consistently. Fully agree. Look, and I fully agree with Paul Markey. The rest have to go. I'm not really going to entertain any more debates on them. To be quite frank, to be honest with you, they need to be sold. They're just not at the level. Udebur is showing a bit of promise. However, I have seen wingers like this rinse and repeat. Don't have a lot of end product. That's something that will either come with experience or don't. That's his biggest problem, is his decision making in the final third. His crosses don't really ever find anybody. Passes usually cut out, and finishing is wild to say the least. Sometimes he's shooting and then you can hang out the window and catch it in Seattle. It's gone that wild, Jack. But like for me, when it comes to Udebur, I've seen wingers like him before. Where he's at currently, I go to that guy at Fulham, prime example, Iwobi. Tricky player, no end product. You go to Adama Traore, tricky player, no end product. We had one ourselves, Lucas Moura, tricky player, doesn't have the end product consistently for what we need. So that's where I have my question marks around Wilson. I think he's fantastic in everything he does to get to the final third. But is he ever going to develop that? Well, only time will tell on that one, unfortunately. But, I have seen wingers of similar ability that can take players on and do. But when it comes to picking out that key moment, they never really have it. And that's why they never really make it to the top of the game. And Wilson could very easily go down that route if he doesn't develop that end product.
Yeah, fair play to Nuno for getting the most out of Adama Traore during that period at Wolves. Ed saying fans overreacting. Who, us? Never. Patty Hardnett, afternoon, folks. As I said already, nothing so far tells me Frank has a plan on how we play. That's a huge worry for me, but I am willing to give him time. Frank needs to stop thinking that we are Brentford. And then I'll use this as a little transition to Dave put in a good question here. He's saying, and by the way, meltdown after Monaco is just not needed. We are a team that's still growing. Give it time. Problem with the fans is that you want everything now. Does not work like that. See Woolwich. Well, we'll move this on then to the likes of Arsenal. It's taken Arsenal over 5 years and over £1 billion spent to get to a position where they are in serious, contention for a league title, and maybe have been for the last couple of seasons. But Spurs fans maybe need to show that type of, patience, right, Billy? Are Spurs fans being too impatient with Thomas Frank? Maybe, and we hate to use them as examples, but Mikel Arteta could have been sacked 10 times over by the fan base if they had their way.
Yeah, and I'm not going to bang on too much about the ownership. I just think we've had so much trauma in the last 25 years as a fan base that we don't have any more patience left. Like we've been told year after year after year under Daniel Levy that we've got a new project, a new manager. We've chopped and changed 17, 18 times in 25 years, which is an insane record, really. I think Liverpool have had 6 or 7 managers in that time at the most. It's just like, I just kind of feel like we're locked in this Daniel Levy-led cycle of not backing a manager, don't give him enough transfer fees, don't give him a good squad, sack the manager, hope someone else comes different, and they don't, and then we just end the cycle. I would hope that if we are actually under this new ownership and it is actually different, even though a lot of the same people are still there and the owner is technically the same family, but maybe we just try and do something different. And I think rather than what we've never really done under the previous owners is try and fix the problem by spending on high quality players rather than just sacking the manager over and over and over again. So for me, let's not look to sack a manager. Let's look to buy Frank the players that will get him in the they want, because that's something we never really did over the last 25 years. So I can see why fans' patience running thin. It's just what we're used to. It's been happening for 25 years under Tottenham. And it is the same as you're right. But hopefully, we've got a lot of noises coming out. They've got a new board. If we sign as many new players in January as we have new board members in the last few weeks, then it'll be a good January. So that's what I'm hoping for, because we keep transforming this board and stuff. But how different is it really going to be? Well, all the noises saying they're going to be different. So let's see if they're actually going to do it.
And to Billy's point, you look at the massive impact Kudus has had. You look at the massive impact Paulinia has had in terms of us getting results. You provide a few more of them. To be honest with you, it doesn't matter what manager you have. You could bring back Conte, Nuno, Jose, and Ange, and they will all do much better because they got better quality players, to be able to deal with, to be able to go and win them games. At the end of the day, I think the problem at Tottenham is we are well aware of our shortcomings in terms of squad and ability of players that we put out on the football pitch sometimes, that we almost need the manager to be Harry Potter. And be that magic man and make up that difference in quality that we lack on the football pitch. But I think the big misunderstanding is it's a two-way street, right? A manager is also only as good as the players that he's got at his disposal. Since Jose Mourinho started managing lesser teams, he doesn't have the same effect that he had when he had the better teams and better players at his disposal, which shows and highlights quality matters, and quality matters even more when you only have one day on the training pitch between games because you're flying and traveling everywhere else. So the quality of players really matters. So to Billy's point, Kudus and Paulinho should highlight that.
I think the one thing that Arsenal maybe showed as well, though, is that if you are to bring in a manager, maybe this is the case when Arteta was a new manager, like he needed to be shown that patience because he didn't have experience from previous clubs, but they sort of allowed him to adapt over time, where like in his first season, I think he was pretty defensive. And then his second season, it felt like the attacking play really came through and they were an exciting team to watch. That sort of developed over a period, but they still had this vulnerability about them. And then now he's in like his David Moyes era where he's very defensively solid, is all about set pieces, and still has an element of the attacking play, but it's almost like he just sort of developed each little, trick and each little card to his game. And maybe that's, I'm not saying that needs to be with Thomas Frank, but that is the type of patience that sometimes is required with the manager. Allow them to fix various things over time. Frank has fixed the defense. He's improved massively set pieces, both defending them and going forward. And then now we're just need to wait for that final jigsaw to come through in terms of the actual build-up play and as well as the attack play. And to a degree, even sometimes the pressing has been pretty lacking actually off of the ball. But maybe that's what Arsenal showed the blueprint of, is that with patience, it is risky to show patience in modern football, but with patience, a manager can develop each stage of what they want to be seeing.
Well, we talk about build-up play about Jack, but I'd argue the build-up play out of the back, and I know a lot of people have a problem with the double pivot, but even from the double pivot, I think is good. I don't think that's our problem. Our problem is we get so many promising breakaways, but they never ever end up with a shot on goal. We never ever end up testing the goalkeeper, and that's a quality issue right there. The demonstration is there of what we can be if we add the right ingredients to finish off our build-up play.
I completely agree with that. And that was the case under Ange, though, which then maybe is a sign that it's just more down to the players maybe than it is just the manager every time. Jerome saying, again, those performances are not sustainable. Everton will be a big test. And if we lose to them, then serious questions will need to be asked. He also said, we had Poch as our Arteta and we sacked him. Now all we have is a disjointed team with different managers every 2 years. Still want patience from the fans.
I do understand what Jerome is saying, but when you look at, look, we're still feeling the effects from Daniel Levy, but at some point we've got to move on. He's gone and stuff like that. But we were bringing a manager every 2 years. Basically, we were doing an Abramovich model that he had at Chelsea, but we weren't giving him the squad to be able to go and have the same success or funding it in that way. So we can't operate like that unless we're going to fund it like that and bring in certain amount of players of a certain amount of quality every time we dip into the transfer market, which means then in order to get to that point, we have to build it like we did under Pochettino, which is going to require a little bit of time. But you're hoping now with the Lewis family being in charge and with the intent that they're supposedly showing, or that at least they're showing and putting out there right now, that they add more quality to it. And then that way you will get to a point where you can actually start pinpointing the manager as the problem. But it's very hard to do that, when we don't fund it the way these other big clubs do. So at some point, you got to do what Arsenal have done, which is build it and fund it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. And then just on the part of Everton, I guess, fans will be judging it game by game. We talk about patience a lot, right, in between games. But, once the game day actually arrives, I think the patience, at least for the day of, does tend to run out because we do react to what we're seeing. And I think things do really need to impress or improve against Everton. But what's going to be funny about that game is if you are going to be watching it at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, Jerome, you might probably want to stay in bed because I don't think Everton with David Moyes are known for brilliant attacking football, and neither are Spurs. So I imagine it's going to be a very cagey game. But hopefully we come out with maybe a Danzo long throw and a 1-0 to the Tottenham.
What I would say to the likes of Jerome and Eddie, though, down under is in order to get yourselves up for the game, because I get it, when you're getting up at 3 a.m. and it's boring football, it's very easy when you're in that tired mode to just drift off back asleep or turn it off and stuff. But if you get up and put on Who Let the Dogs Out or a bit of DMX, the dogs are here and stuff like that, because that's the way we're going to be. We are in an absolute dogfight. Dog days are over from that Florence and the Machine, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Get yourself in the mood for the game, because this is what we are all the way up until January. And if we don't fix it in January, again all the way until the summer. So at least it'll keep you awake and entertain you, because they are good songs, by the way.
I'd also maybe just get a little ice water, just throw your face in there just to wake yourselves up, just to stay in it, and maybe get an early beer in. Ian Ferguson, to what Dave was saying earlier, I've been a fan since 2019. We're on manager, 6 to 7 at this point? And then Jason Bell followed up saying, depends on how many times you can count Ryan Mason as manager. We'll kind of start to wrap up here, maybe on a kind of move this actually to Vicario, just because I know Dave had a lot to say about Bentancur today, and I don't want him to.
No, I don't mind. Look, you and Billy can take it away on that. I'll just come in at the end.
Maybe you've been asked this as well.
Divisive one in the fan base right now.
Maybe you've been asked this a lot, Billy, so we don't need to spend a ton of time on it. But Bentancur, he's received heavy criticism this season, with many fans claiming he's the reason behind Tottenham's struggles. Do you think this Bentancur-Palhinha pivot is kind of the main issue that's going on right now?
I think it's a really complicated question because there's a lot of problems that are contributing to our lack of flair, and I think our build-up in general is terrible under Thomas Frank at the moment. Certainly has been in the last 4 or 5, 6 games, probably since the Wolves game. I think having no Romero is a much bigger contribution than Bentancur at the moment. I think if you're going to play Bentancur, you have to play to his strengths, and at the moment we're not playing to his strengths. We're playing him alongside Palhinha. I think Palhinha is an excellent ball winner, excellent at breaking up the attacks. Bentancur is a very solid midfielder who won't give the ball away, but he's not really particularly creative. Definitely not since the injury anyway. He's just kind of lost a lot of his attacking threat. I don't know if his confidence has gone, but his main instinct at the moment is to get the ball and turn around and pass it sideways or pass it backwards. I think playing both of them is probably a concern, but I think, you have to consider the fact as well that the options alongside them are all either teenagers or at most 22. And I think perhaps a contributing factor into this is maybe Thomas Frank wants to stick with the experience, and stick with the team. If we're playing away in the Champions League, you've got Palhinha and Bentancur, and I know, not particularly great against Monaco, but generally speaking, that pivot is very solid for us. So it's a difficult situation. I don't think he's the main factor. I would be interested to see if Thomas Frank switches it up in the next few games, because we haven't really seen Sarr play alongside, or Bergvall or Archie Gray play alongside Palhinha in that pivot in the bottom. It would be interesting to see what happens there. I don't think Bergvall has had a particularly good run of form lately. I think Archie Gray, on the other hand, has looked really good every time I've seen him this season. It'd be interesting to see Palhinha and Archie Gray play there in the midfield together, something which we've not really seen this season. Sarr seems to have fallen off a cliff in terms of Thomas Frank. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next. But I think it's probably a little bit harsh to blame solely Bentancur. I think the biggest issue for me is our build-up is just shocking at the moment, I hope. And I think Thomas Frank is the one that needs to sort that. He's not playing to Bentancur's strengths. And Bentancur is certainly not having Bentancur and Palhinha there. It's certainly not helping our build-up.
Do you think Pape Sarr is the answer? Do you think that's what Frank needs to do, is get Sarr into the team?
I don't particularly know if he's the answer in the pivot. I think we've been at our best this season when Pape Sarr is playing in the 10, which is a really interesting conversation to have, because we've just signed Javi Simmons, who's a star number 10, but we've actually looked better when Pape Sarr was playing there. And maybe we kind of need his ability, his athletic ability to get up and down the pitch. Maybe that's where we need him. Might be better if we see Xavi on the left, Sarr in the 10. I don't know what the answer is at the moment, just because it seems to be a long time since we played well.
Yeah. For me with Bentancur, I can see what sometimes people mean by some of the sideways and backwards passing, but when we are a team that's sometimes just struggling to get our foot on the ball, I think that's what you need in certain games. So you need a guy that just isn't going to give the ball away, is going to sort of have that bit of calm, that bit of composure. Like when we're under the cosh, when we're under pressure and teams are pinning us back and we're really deep, you need that guy that can sort of just calm it down, string together a few passes, sort of allow your team to relax for a little bit. That's kind of the benefit of being in possession. You're not working as hard, because defensively, when you're out of possession, you are working harder, you're breathing harder, you have to expend more energy to try to close down the ball. And also, it's just good to have maybe a sustained period of possession. So I don't think there's anything that wrong sometimes with just having a guy that is going to be a assured player on the ball, that isn't going to give it away straight away, and it's sort of going to allow you to relax for at least a period of time. Like I said, yes, at times maybe he can make more forward runs, could maybe be asked to make more forward passes. I do think he does. I think people have been very blind to them at times. It seems like it's just an agenda that he only plays sideways and backwards passes. Dave and I pointed out in the watch along the other day, there was one period where again, when we were under pressure by Monaco, we played this nice little pass out to Pedro Porro, received it right back, and then pinned like a 40-yard switch of play all the way across to Odegaard, and that got us forward. And it seemed like that wasn't mentioned very much on Twitter sphere when it comes to the Bentancur agenda. And I think defensively at times, Bentancur is very solid. Like Palhinha is the best ball winner in the team, but Bentancur as well turns the ball over, and he is able to sort of press, I think, as well at a pretty high level. I just am pretty impressed by how quickly he has become almost a Højbjerg-esque kind of scapegoat, it seems like, in the team, where it seems like he is the main problem for all of our woes, when, in my opinion, the main issue is what Dave brought up earlier. I think it's more the attack and the forward line than it really is the midfield. I think the midfield, yeah, we can have conversations about, but for me, it's really not the main issue at the moment.
The problem you've got with that, though, you've got so many people that are Matisse Tell fans, so many people that back Brennan Johnson, so many people that love Odegaard, so many people that love Simmons, that they're deflecting the issue and looking for a scapegoat further back the pitch. Further back the pitch is not usually where your creativity comes from. Their responsibility is to pass the ball, build out from the back, which I think we do pretty well. The problem is when we get into the final third, when we get down the sides, we do absolutely fuck all with it. So people are looking for a scapegoat, similar to what they've done with Højbjerg, scapegoat with Højbjerg, and then spent the next 2 years screaming out for a CDM, a Paulinho type player. Look, when it comes to Bentancur, I get he's not marauding forward like everyone wants. But has anyone questioned, is that what Thomas Frank wants from that position? Because if you go back and listen to what he said about Lucas Bergvall after the West Ham game when he played in that position, he said in the following game, in the pre-match press conference, that when it comes to Lucas Bergvall, that sometimes we have to tell him to stop running because he keeps vacating that position and leaving too much space. So is it a case that Bentancur can't do it, or is it a case that it's instructions from Thomas Frank? And to prove my point that he can do it, go back to when he was underneath Antonio Conte and he was allowed to get further forward and Højbjerg sat back deeper. He affected games for Tottenham Hotspur. He played progressive passes. He scored goals. He turned ball higher up the pitch. So for me, it's not a case that he can't do it because he can. Look, I take the argument. Do I want to see more progressive passing from him at times? Yes, of course I do. What he done against Monaco, where he bounced the ball off Porro, got it back and hit Odegaard 60 yards away, he has it in his locker. Why can't he produce that more? Against Aston Villa at times, during the watch-along, he got the ball in a good position. I'm screaming at him, get turned, play forward. He plays sideways. I can get with that. But people that have been screaming for him to be dropped out of the team, when he came off against Monaco, we couldn't retain possession whatsoever. And that highlights how important he is to this team, that if we want to Jack's point, have any sort of possession or be able to retain possession, he is crucial for that. If not, we are going direct and playing long ball. Because the reality is, as much as I love Bergvall and as huge as a prospect I think he is, and I think he's got a higher ceiling than Rodrigo Bentancur, he can't be trusted to play in that position because he gives away the ball too much. The other night against Monaco, he dropped deep twice. Gave it away, nearly went in the back of our own net. Against Newcastle last season, done the same thing, they punished us. Against Wolves last season, done the same thing, playing in that exact position. They took the ball off him, they punished us. Against Brighton, he lost the ball in a deeper position for their second goal, they punished us. There's a history of this with Bergvall, and that's one thing that no one wants to talk about when it comes to the kid. Now, of course, the kid's 19. He's experienced at this level. Things like that are going to happen. But the reality is, we don't have time right now to be able to accept things like that. That's why Rodrigo Bentancur plays in there. And I think it's more instructions from Thomas Frank related than Rodrigo Bentancur actually being the problem. Because you can put Pape Sarr in there. He's as loose in possession sometimes as Bergvall. You can put Gray in there. But the reality is, sometimes he can also be caught cold on the ball. So for me, it's got to be Bentancur and Paulinho. They protect that back line. We are nowhere near as open as much, and teams don't get us through the middle as much when them two play as when Thomas Frank has broke up that partnership in other games. So for me, that's why they've got to play. But instead of people just blaming Bentancur for it, why don't you actually go and look at what Thomas Frank has said about other players, and what he's asking them to do and stuff, and realize that maybe it is actually instructional, that he doesn't want anyone vacating that position, because that is the key to the defensive solidity, by having them two sitting in front of that and not vacating. That's why I say, actually deal with the problem, speak about the problem. Xavi Simons hasn't hit the ground running and done what many fans thought he was. Matisse Tell hasn't been the answer like many fans thought he was. Wilson Odegaard is raw. Richarlison wouldn't trap a bag of cement. The players we've got are not good enough. So everyone else is looking at other players, and they look at the likes of Van de Ven and go, well, he scored goals. Bentancur needs to be more creative. Even when Bentancur scored our only goal against Aston Villa, which shows he's chipping in and adding some creativity, he's gone, okay, well, I won't just create, I'll actually go and score a goal. He still gets ridiculed. The problem is further up the pitch. Blame the fucking problem. You're on mute, Jacko.
Thanks. Bentancur plays so many sideways and backwards passes because we don't have a coherent midfield when we're in possession. He rarely has a progressive outlet. Frank does need to fix this. And then Steve D saying none of our midfielders are very progressive. Benny moves the ball forward the most, but the bar is still very low at the minute. I could probably agree with that with Steve D there. Let's finish off here. Or actually, sorry, we had Al Ben earlier. He's been very patient. Thank you, Al. Saying, I've commented this about a month ago that Thomas Frank is a very nice and boring man. And that's what we've been seeing in this team. His personality reflecting the football, Billy?
Yeah, you definitely label it as that. I think I do think maybe he's a very safe pair of hands, and maybe that's what we need as a football club. You know, we've been so used to being so erratic and changing managers. I've just seen actually someone has tweeted a graph on a league table of the Premier League of the most permanent managers, and we are second in the history of the Premier League. Only Southampton have more. They have 22 permanent managers. We have 19. Wow. You know, maybe a safe and steady pair. I think the problem is we're so erratic and neurotic as a fan base that we're used to having massive characters like Postecoglou and Mourinho and Conte and all these managers that, whether they're the headline, they're the alpha male, sort of dominant, and incredibly passionate and storyline grabbing managers, and a safe pair of Tom Frank like that, we don't really know how to deal with it. And I think maybe it might be good for us just to have a safe manager who's going to sort us out, going to end up being a sensible football team. I just don't know if the fan base is going to be able to hack it, because we're a crazy bunch, Tottenham fans. We're used to crazy things. We're not used to having a safe pair of hands. We're used to having a roller coaster. So I don't know if it's a good fit for us, because already you're getting a lot of fans that are sort of complaining about the style of football, complaining about Thomas Frank. I think there's a lot of psychological problems within our fan base, and I include myself in that. And I'd be worried that a safe pair of hands might not last very long at Tottenham, just because we're so used to having the crazy excitement and highs and lows.
We like the box office. I'm kind of chuckling. I'm chuckling at the fact that almost a lot of managers' personalities almost do seem to reflect exactly in their football. Like Jurgen Klopp's personality almost seemed to reflect the way that they play.
Postecoglou's as well, very aggressive.
Postecoglou's, Guardiola, right, with being so particular about where everyone has to stand, what everyone has to do, right? He's such a micromanager of everything. Even the case of Conte, right, where Conte just has always that sort of intense, glum look on his face, and sometimes his football is even a bit that way as well, where it's intense but also a bit glum to watch. So I actually was chuckling at that idea out, Ben. Maybe you are onto something, that personalities tend to reflect the style of play. Great comment.
I just know that under our fan base, historically, we don't do well with boring football, do we? It just, it doesn't work for our fan base. The same with allegedly West Ham, who are losing quite comfortably at the moment. They always talk about the West Ham way. There's a Tottenham way. I fear for any manager that plays boring football at Tottenham. It just doesn't tend to work out.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask that question from earlier about, is the patience actually, in my opinion, I think the patience won't be as long for Frank because of that. Whereas if you did play a nice brand of football, I think people will show you more patience. Hence why I think Postecoglou went as long as he did, despite the results kind of slipping, because everyone knew that there is a good brand of football in there. We just aren't seeing it, and maybe, or we were, it's just the results just weren't coming. And I think where with Frank, it's kind of the opposite, where the results are there, but once the results start slipping, it's not like there's going to be a ton of patience, I think, because the football has been that great. So completely agree there, Billy. Just lastly, and we'll comment on this quickly, Vicario had some criticism for his teammates after the Monaco game. It was not the best performance, he said, from us. So a lot of work for this and to learn from, because of the level in the Champions League is very high. If you miss some basics, it's hard to compete with a good team. He also added that tonight it was about the effort and the mentality of the team, the awareness of danger that you need to have in some situations. Tonight, we lacked that a little bit. Is Vicario justified in criticizing his teammates so soon, Dave, after a good performance from him?
Got to be a bit hypocritical here, because, right, we live in a world where managers can't come out and criticize players, right, because they lose the dressing room the minute they sort of do that. So you are, in effect, relying on your players in your squad, the leaders within your squad, to then do that for you, right? To put them on blast in front of the media for you, and the hope is you get a reaction. So in one way, I like that from Vicario. However, he is in the leadership group. Is that not a part of the leadership group's responsibility to make sure that everyone's on it, that performances don't drop off, that, everyone's on it week in, week out, and that there's some consistency to what we're doing? So it's sort of like he can come out and say it, but that's a part of his role as a part of the leadership group. So, I mean, what are we doing here? It's like when Hugo Lloris used to come out and criticize people, and he's making mistakes left, right, and center and stuff like that. It's just like, what are we actually doing here? It's just, look, one thing I think everyone is sick of the inconsistency that this Tottenham side have shown under multiple managers with multiple different players since Pochettino. We all just want to get back to where we were under Pochettino, where we can put some consistent wins on the board and just even get ourselves in the conversation of winning things again. That's what we want. That's where we are as a football club. And we really need a strong leadership group to get us back there. So in one way, he's doing Frank's job for him, which is good, but he's also a part of the problem. He's been inconsistent this year. He's cost us points, but then he goes and saves us a point against Monaco. So he's also one of them players that he's talking about. So if I'm a player in the dressing room and he comes after me, well, my first thing is going to be, well, what are you talking about? Because you're doing exactly what you're accusing me of. So unfortunately, right now, because we have very few consistent players, someone like Romero or Van de Ven are the only two that can actually come out and put the squad on blast.
I mean, Billy, this is the last question of the evening. Is Vicario just all of a sudden, getting some confidence after a good performance and then decides to just lay into his teammates, or is this the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. He didn't make those comments in the last couple of games before that, did he? So, I think he's definitely using his probably his best performance, maybe possibly ever at Tottenham to do that. I think, if you look at the season as a whole, I think he's got to look at himself as well. He's made, not had the best season so far, I think. But maybe, there's so many different styles of leadership. Maybe, being one of the most experienced players, being in the leadership group, we need some hard truths. So it's an interesting question for sure. I think, it'd be interesting to see how it went down with the squad. He's very happy to sort of, have a go at players and grab them and have a go at them. I think he also needs to do a bit of self-reflection too, because I don't think he's been consistently as brilliant this season as he has been at his very, very best. So I hope they all look together. I think it's one of those things where you have different styles, different leaders. You have people like Roy Keane that will hammer players, but Roy Keane can certainly back up on the pitch. I don't think Vicario is quite at a level where he's doing that consistently now. If he was playing that way every single week, then he can have a go at the players. But I think the whole squad needs a bit of introspection at the moment because we have to see better, and fans are going to demand better, as they rightly should.
But that's
I think you're right that he does the Roy Keane thing, Dave, where he does yell at his players, but then he doesn't back it up maybe as much like Roy Keane kind of did.
Well, that's the exact key point right there. If you're going to come out and do that, you have to be able to back it up on the football pitch, and he's not. So, which for me is only going to create friction in the dressing room, because like I said, someone like me would be sitting there waiting to go, well, what the fuck are you talking about, Vic? You're being just as bad.
I mean, I'm a teacher as well. I mean, there's all kinds of different kinds of teachers, and it's similar in leaders. They have different qualities. But if you look at Son, for example, you will never see Son call out his players after a game. And Son's probably the most popular player among other players we've ever had. So I think Dave's right there. It might spark a few arguments, and there's different leaders, different styles. So it certainly might spark a few arguments in the dressing room going forward.
It kind of reminded me, it wasn't as bad as the Fulkrug from last season, but like there was that game where Fulkrug just went out and just absolutely tore into all of his West Ham teammates. And then you're kind of thinking to yourself, this is kind of entertaining. And probably if you're a West Ham fan, you're happy to listen to it because it feels good to listen to. But at the same time, it's like, what have you done for us, this season? So it's a bit of that actually. But I don't think Vicario's was nearly as bad or as hypocritical as Fulkrug's, and we know that he has had amazing performances at the club in comparison. But I think we'll leave things off there. Billy, thank you for taking time out of your Friday evening and your weekend.
Thank you very
for
much,
joining
guys.
us.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope we get a nice win this weekend. And I mainly hope we get a decent performance.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope we get a good win and good performance, because then we'll just be having the opposite conversations, the next week, full of praise and everything. Dave, any final comments from yourself here? And also, everybody, do follow Billy on Twitter. I imagine a large majority of people that are watching us now are quite aware of his where we get the majority of our humor from Twitter Reacts for, but he's our source of content there. But yeah, thank you, Billy, and everybody. Give him a follow over there and look out for anything that he might be doing. Also, do follow Change for Spurs as well, which I'll put in the chat too. But Dave, any final comments?
No, look, same to Billy. Big game on the weekend. Haven't beaten Everton away in over 4 years. Shows maybe the
I
trickiness of
think
the game.
last year that was probably our worst performance possibly ever last year, wasn't it? I remember that 3-0. That was
Yeah,
absolutely
the hand
horrific.
back 3.
Well, I'm just hoping Thomas Frank doesn't go back 3 because I'm going to automatically just get shades of what happened
That
last
was
year.
horrific.
So I hope
that game.
Thomas Frank doesn't switch it up because, I sort of said last year when Frank done that or when Ange Postecoglou done that against Everton, it's concerning. Well, when all of a sudden you're sort of ditching everything that you believed in before and changing it up. So, look, I think it's a massive game this weekend. I really think Thomas Frank needs to win with the fixtures coming up. Let's get behind the boys. I'll see you back here with my predicted lineup Sunday morning, along with the pre-game and also the watch-along, also your post-match reaction. Smash the like on this, and we'll see you again on Sunday. And as always, come on, you Spurs. Great job to Jack, by the way, for the questions today.
No. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. See you this weekend. Enjoy your weekends, everybody.